Welcome, Ian, Barbara, Ben, Polly, Brigadier, Sarah Jane, Tegan, Nissa, Perry, Mel, Rose, Amy, Clara, Yaz, Ryan, Donna, and Ruby to episode 525 of an Unearthly podcast, streaming live on the 21st of September 2024 and featuring our tier list of Doctor Who first stories. I am Bill Sylvia, the one in black, and I probably thought was going to say that faster in my head, but I definitely would have run out of breath. With me are acting technical director Alex Fireheart.
I know I definitely would have tripped over myself trying to do that.
And color commentator Aaron Romeo Moon Burke.
Hello.
And I just realized I had never fixed the number at the start of our next season. We would have had 2 seasons starting at 501. So, Aaron, I think you said you were finishing your Pathfinder campaign tonight?
Yes, we just finished up our Pathfinder single shot. It's the first time I've ever played Pathfinder. Kind of an interesting system, very similar obviously to Dungeons and Dragons, although they have since gone through and redone the second edition Pathfinder rules to now cut out anything associated with WotC, with Wizards of the Coast. So now they are completely standalone and they don't have to worry about being sued by WotC in the future or having to pay royalties to them anytime soon. So
I
at
need
least
to
not for
read
second edition.
I need to read the player's handbook for Pathfinder Second Edition and see if that's something I'm interested in.
It's
I've skimmed the D&D
mhm.
5e, and I feel like they streamlined it too much, which may be nice for new players, but for me, it's just I feel like a lot of things I'm used to having access to as a player are stripped from 5th edition and probably 4th as well.
Yeah. So the player's handbook for 5.5e has come out for Dungeons and Dragons as well, and Chris really, my boyfriend, looked through it, really enjoys it. All of the spells for the classes are mixed with the classes, so you don't have to turn to the back of the book to look everything up. All of the stats are there too, so you know immediately what you're looking at. So, Pathfinder is interesting because it is a 3 action economy. So instead of D&D has action, movement, and bonus action economy, right? Pathfinder, you can do 3 movements. You could do 3 actions. Granted, there's a penalty after for each successive action, like if you're doing an attack or specifically attack actions. um an example that my friend Bob came up with is they were playing a D&D campaign. Person was trying to get up a gangplank to attack some pirates. They were able to do 2 moves, and after that were not able to attack. Whereas if it were in the Pathfinder system, they would be able to do 2 moves and also do an attack. So that's kind of an example of the differences between the 2 systems, and that's why my friend Bob likes it so much. Plus, criticals do twice of the total damage, or double the total damage, instead of just the what do you call it? The or not multipliers, but the my brain just died.
I'm realizing I meant for it to be more just a general how was your campaign and how
Oh,
did it have a good ending, and it ended up you becoming a brand ambassador for Paizo, which was partially my fault.
oh, sorry. Yes, I like it. For
Although we're
me,
not
it's like
sponsored, but we could be.
we could be Paizo. It's personally for me, it feels like Dungeons and Dragons for adults and stuff, so who can handle like more
and,
complex
and
situations.
as somebody who's been playing D&D for 20 years, you see what that says about how I feel about modern D&D.
Yeah. So definitely if you think that it's been oversimplified, give Pathfinder second edition a try. And if you think Pathfinder 2e is too simplified, check out first E, where it's even more complex. So yeah, anyway, the campaign ended in us leaving a room that could have awakened a bunch of skeletons. We decided to be like, hey, we came here, we got what we wanted, let's leave. And through diplomacy, I was able to talk in our bandit member of our crew from going and opening up sarcophagi that would have released skeletons all over the place. He could have gotten a cool sword too, but I talked him out of it and we left.
By the
So.
way, mentioning it, I forget if you already know, but Pathfinder First Edition is basically D&D 3.5 with a little bit of homebrew added.
Yeah,
I was gonna
it's
ask that.
people I know of call it 3.5.7. So it's like 3.7 or 3.75, I guess, basically, kind of. So, but yeah, check that out. Check out maybe D&D 5.5 and see if you enjoy that too, because apparently, and the artwork for 5.5 is amazing. It is gorgeous artwork inside that book. So,
I just opened my chicken tenders that I ordered a few hours ago because I added burger with them. And the chicken tenders look nothing like the picture on DoorDash. Kind of wish I... Oh, well.
Do they have bites taken out of them?
No, it's just completely different style of breading.
Oh.
It's like they took a stock photo of like crispy chicken tenders, but this is not a crispy style breading.
Oh. Okay.
Alex, any updates you want to give us before we dive into the podcast?
Well, thankfully I got a good amount of work this fortnight, because I worked within this last fortnight I worked 2 6-hour shifts and a 7-hour shift. So, because at that point, with the trip coming up in late October, for me to finally at least start the process of getting a diagnosis as either being on the autism spectrum or having ADHD or both or whatever. One way or the other. The first thing for that is in October. And it wasn't as much of a worry, and then that wrestling promotion decided to open up their tickets earlier this month, I think. And so I dropped money on a ticket, and then because that ended up being so cheap because I couldn't get front row, I sorted out my hotel as well. And just went for a place that's literally over the road from where the show is happening. So that ended up being what sunk a lot out of my the money I had. So I've basically just been taking any extra hours they can give me, to the point that it's a good thing that we will be not streaming next week, because that's our sort of in between season week off, because I might be working a full day that day. Just to make extra money, because that's last time they offered me Sunday work, I was I'm just kind of too burnt out to really do it. But now I'm just well, it's double pay, full day. Fuck it, I need the money right now. Yeah, aside from that, it's basically just been the last 3 days, maybe 4 days, have been just catching up on stuff for this podcast.
I thought that sentence was going to be longer. So I've been chewing a chicken tender while you were talking. All right, on tonight's show, we have some birthdays and a death. No other news or geek talk. And then we jump into our tier list. Now, this probably will be one of our shorter tier lists, but it may still involve a ton of discussion, so we figured leave plenty of time for it. And actually, before all of that, we do have a channel update. So we've decided, due in part to, well, we had a bit of a couple discussions, and there's not a ton of Doctor Who. I mean, there's thanks to Big Finish, there's always an infinite amount of Doctor Who material to review, but there's not a huge ton of Doctor Who material that we're really focusing on reviewing and have a ton of enthusiasm for. So rather than just keep going for the sake of not changing, and to avoid feeling like this is a chore, we're cutting the podcast down to once every 2 weeks. Now, you may have noticed over the past couple of years, sometimes that's been our schedule because we've been busier. We haven't had as large of a cast, so it hasn't been as possible, right? There used to be times where I would disappear for 2-3 months, and the podcast would go on perfectly fine without me. I think that would be a struggle if that was even possible at all right now.
Mm-hmm.
So all between that and because of the fact that after over a decade, sometimes people want to start with other creative pursuits and need some time for that. We're going to once every 2 weeks. I think I already said that. We're probably going to take a slightly longer break between seasons, and we're talking about possibly shortening the length of our seasons. Although the fact that this season ends on a 25 suggests that it may not be the right season to do that. We're going to have to talk about that off stream. So yeah, so that is what's going to happen going forward. And with that, let's move to Aaron with the birthdays.
All right, I'm just finishing up posting our socials. Bam, 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 and bam. Okay. All right, let me bring this up here. All right, so birthdays plus one. September 15th. We'll be
The plus one is left over from when I was the plus one.
Oh, okay. No, Bill's erasing himself from history. Okay. All right, September 15th, we have Betty Elsad. Fatty Elsad, right? Elsad?
I think it's an Egyptian name, and I have no clue how to pronounce it properly. I'm
I
sorry.
apologize for that. I did not look it up to see what the proper pronunciation was, and that's my failing. But this person, she also played Rom in Class, has turned 31. I almost forgot that Class existed. And that I kind of
Pretty
want
sure
to go
that'd be a
back and
he, by
rewatch
the
it.
way.
Oh, sorry, Rom. Wait, are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Never mind. Okay. He turned 31. Sorry. Apologies. All right. Moving on to September 15th, Colin McFarlane, who played General Pierce in Torchwood, Children of Earth, and The War Between the Land and the Sea, plus several Doctor Who roles, has turned 63. On September 18th, we'll celebrate the birthday of Gary Russell, script editor for the Sarah Jane Adventures and several Doctor Who and Torchwood stories, and director and producer of countless Big Finish audios, has turned 61.
I thought he was also a Dalek operator, but I can't find that, so I might be mixing him up with somebody else. If anybody knows, let me know in the comments.
Okay. September 19th is Caroline John, who played Liz Shaw in season 7. Would have been 84, but died in 2012 at the age of 71. September 20th, Meena Anwar played Geeta Chandra in the Sarah Jane Adventures. I think I was confusing the other person with her. Anyway, played Geeta Chandra in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and Good Thing in the Doctor Who episode Smile, turned 55. September 20th as well, Christopher Barry, director of 10 Doctor Who stories from 1963 to 1980, would have been 99, but died in 2014 at 88.
Right, moving from there, and speaking of people who have been with us in Dalek stories since 1963. David Graham, one of the original voices of the Daleks, has died at the age of 99. No cause given, but I think that's to be expected at the age of 99. Graham, working alongside Peter Hawkins, helped to define the sound of the Daleks in 1963, voicing them again in 1964 and 1965, and then again for the 60th anniversary special, The Daleks in Color. He also appeared on screen for roles such as Charlie the bartender in The Gunfighters, which we will not hold against him, and Kerensky the mad scientist in City of Death. Outside of Doctor Who, David Graham got his start as Grandpa Twink in Four Feather Falls in 1958. In 1965, he played several characters in Thunderbirds, and later played Parker in the show's 2015 revival. And recently, he's been known as Grandpa Pig of Peppa Pig. So rest in peace, David Graham. And that brings us to our tier list. So if we're going off of what we did last time, so I know Aaron was not here. What we basically did was, might have been a little smoother because for that one I had more detailed notes, and this time I kind of did not watch all of the stories, so I do not have detailed notes. But I usually say something about the episode, kind of refresh everyone what it was about. Then we all kind of give our ratings, and then the person running tech, so in this case Alex, gives their rating and places it in the final location. So we start off with an Unearthed. Maybe I should have refreshed instead of making my own list. But at least I know the stories. We start off with an Unearthly Child. So of course we have the famous first episode in which Ian and Barbara follow Susan to the junkyard. That is generally beloved episode. And then we have 3 episodes of them being captured, released by the Tribe of Gum, which generally tend to be less favorite episodes. So I kind of, on my own list, I kind of split the difference. We have an A episode and a C story combined for a B rank.
I will admit, I personally did not bother to watch the Tribe of Gum stuff, so I can literally only rank it based on the first episode. And based purely on that, I would give it an S.
I actually forgot to put it on my list. I have a list of 1 through 16 on here.
You have a list of doctors 1 through 15, and then you're like, oh, I forgot Doctor 1.
No, well, yeah, I actually included the War Doctor, but forgot the first Doctor because I was thinking post regeneration, and we never saw the first Doctor regenerate.
Have you seen the story in the past?
I may have had it on the background, but I don't remember much of the story at all.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go ahead with cannot rate. I may have just seen the first part with them following her to the junkyard, but I don't remember. I didn't remember to watch it. So sorry, First Doctor.
So I guess splitting the difference between me and Bill, that'd
A
be
for the first episode and C for the other 3 episodes, and we have S for the first episode and didn't watch the other 3 episodes, and we have didn't watch any of the 4 episodes.
Nope, didn't.
You know what? Thankfully, I don't need to make this call. Alex is the tech person. Alex gets to decide where it lands.
I guess splitting the difference, it could probably end up as an A by virtue of starting in an S and then being brought down by the other stuff.
I can see that too. It's also pretty unique for the time too, because I don't think anyone had really seen anything like that on TV, had they?
Probably not.
I mean, on TV, probably not. I mean, I think Quatermass was only theatrical at that point.
Yeah, so in
I'm sure
terms
there.
of
I'm sure there was
I think-
sci-fi.
I think it had
but
been done for TV because I think I found out that the movies were one of those were like the Doctor Who and the Daleks things where it was like a movie adaptation of TV stuff. Um, but I could be remembering that wrong, but I feel like that was a situation there.
since we already have talked about this having a split, our original rankings were 4.88 for episode 1 and 2.75 for episodes 2 through 4. So take that however you will.
I'd say that like with me giving it an S and then yours bringing it down a bit, that would probably could work as just bringing it down to an A.
All right, so we have an Unearthly Child, an A. Or if you want to be uncharitable about it, the Tribe of Gum gets an A. Next, we have The Power of the Daleks. So, of course, the second Doctor's premiere. This is the first regeneration story. And this story uses the known villain of the Daleks to establish that, yes, this is still the Doctor. It is also the longest story on this tier list. It is the only 6-parter. All of the rest are 4-parters or shorter. And yeah, so it's a good episode. I wouldn't say it like cracks the like one of the best episodes of all time list. But it's easily an A episode for me.
I will say the funny thing is, to me, I wasn't sure where this was necessarily gonna land, and part of it is probably bias because Patrick Troughton is my favorite Doctor. I've realized over the years that if he's not my favorite, he's my favorite classic.
Fair. I also realize this may also depend for some people on whether you watched it before or after they animated it.
Right. Yeah, like I love how the regeneration itself is handled, given, to be fair, they haven't entirely figured it out yet, so it's not so much intentionally being it's intentionally being coy, but it's like, well, we don't exactly know what we're really doing either. So well, like, but I love the Doctor
Yeah,
being...
I noticed the word regeneration never appears.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it doesn't appear until Planet of the Spiders, I think. But yeah, like the Doctor being coy about it and pretending that he's someone else, just to kind of mess with mess with Ben and Polly, is kind of funny. And like it is an added layer of mystery. You can only arguably you could only get away with this once. It's been long enough now that you could probably get away with this kind of, oh, I don't know who that Doctor fellow is, or at least I'm not that person, I'm someone else. Like that kind of thing is interesting. It's the first instance of someone actively portraying the Doctor differently than who came before them. And all that kind of thing. To me, this is a very solid Dalek story. I really like the side cast as well. I honestly would give this an S. Rank this an S. Like, I did not necessarily expect it to. I expected it to be at least one of the top 3. But upon rewatching, even with the animated and how kind of janky sometimes the animation can be, I do really love this story. So it's an S for me.
All right, Aaron.
Again, I don't remember watching this one, so I'm going to go ahead and do cannot rate on this one. Okay. I'm also hurriedly putting my selections into the grid on my side,
Gotcha.
so I can actually give a better estimate of everything.
And yeah, between everything, you didn't have time to rewatch any for this, I think. So.
No, I didn't, but I do remember a lot of stuff. Like, for example, a
Hmm.
1996 movie, I remember the feeling I got from it, and I remember most of the parts of that because I've seen it multiple times.
Hmm.
So I'm just trying to go through and pick out which ones I want in which tiers now.
Hmm. So we have a low S, high A ranking.
Hmm. So, not sure how we'd necessarily split the difference, so I'm legitimately going to flip a coin.
If I didn't have my own list in front of me, I would say, oh, just put in S. There's nothing there yet. But I have 3 stories in S and 2 in A on my own list. So I don't know if the final is going to look like that, but we may not want to be overstacking S.
Hmm. S won the coin flip.
Okay.
Hmm.
So next we have Spearhead from Space, and this one is the first one that takes the tack of we have some well-established characters. I guess arguably Ben and Polly were established, but not as
Mm-hmm.
established as the Daleks. But at this time we have the Brigadier and Benson, who have both this is now their 3rd appearance on the show. We have the Doctor, we have the switch to color, we have the brand new unit set. Not the first introduction of Unit. I remember when we first reviewed this, I was one of the few who gave it a 5.0. I say few, I just remember it did not get a 5. It actually only got a 4.3, lower than Power of the Daleks is 4.8.
Hmm.
So I don't know how other people would feel here, but for me, this is an S story.
Yeah, I'd say it is for me as well. And I think like
I just want to be clear because I just realized that captions might fuck that up. I said an S story, not an ass story.
um yeah, like I mean, for me this has a lot of things going for it. Between the fact that this is just the most uniquely shot classic Who story
Mm-hmm.
ever by virtue of the fact that it is entirely shot on film and entirely shot on location, which, to be fair, was not by choice. It was the fact that the studios that they normally use at the time were either the people who worked in them were on strike, or there was like health reasons they couldn't film on them at the time. I forget which it was. So the producer who was on his way out, and this was like his last story, was basically like, well, fuck it, we'll film the entire thing on film and just film the whole damn thing on location, which
Mm-hmm.
the BBC apparently kind of shit a brick over, but then he had to be like, I mean, use our own buildings. We'll just use those. Like, I think the
Oh yeah,
hospital is
was the
like
unit set even in this episode?
I don't think so. No, I don't even think Benson technically was. I could be wrong.
That might be why this is so much shorter than the rest of season 7.
Hmm.
Benson was, because I remember there was a conversation about, oh, the Doctor? Yes, this is the Doctor. He looks different or something like that.
Ah, must have been that he was just in it. Comes
Unless
in a lot
unless unless
later.
I'm mixing up a conversation from Robot with this one, but I think he
Possibly.
was.
Like, I remember him being in Robot, but I don't entirely
Mhm.
recall him being in this. I mean, he did exist
Mm-hmm.
prior, technically. Um,
Yes.
but
He was Corporal Benson in The
mm,
Invasion. He's Sergeant Benson now.
yeah.
And then he'll become Warrant Officer Benson in Robot.
Hmm. Like I don't recall him being in this, and if he wasn't, it might have just been that they couldn't get him back at the time. Given that he shows up, I'm pretty sure he's in every other story this season. So,
Hmm.
so like if he's not in this, then it's a matter of just like whoops, or if he is, maybe he just wasn't a fully named character yet because he wasn't named in the invasion either. I don't think. He was just kind of a background unit guy. But yeah, like I really love this story. Like the Autons, this is like a solid introduction for them.
Oh yeah, this is the first appearance of the Autons. I didn't
Yeah.
mention that.
It's the it's not the first Robert Holmes story, but I'm pretty sure this is the first of like the notable Robert Holmes stories. Because he did write at least one or two, I think, for the Second Doctor, but they're like kind of if I recall
He
correctly.
wrote the Crotons and the Space Pirates, and I remember seeing the first episode of the Space Pirates. And I was like, yeah, this feels like Robert Holmes. The Crotons, I feel like that's one of those, like if you're a hardcore 60s Doctor Who fan, you remember the Crotons, but I think it's also, I'm not even sure if it's one that was lost for a while or not.
It might have been, but I think
Which I think the Space Pirates is partially lost, because otherwise I would have watched it on Tubi by now.
Right. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell this is a Robert Holmes story because you've got stuff like that random country bumpkin type guy who tries like getting some money off of finding one of the quote unquote meteorites and like having an argument with his wife and such. Like that's very Robert Holmes, having fun side characters like that.
Once you watch a lot of Robert Holmes stories, it kind of ruins a lot of Doctor Who, because you're like, oh yeah, I expect the side characters to be regular people I could meet in the world, and you don't always get that when he's not around.
Yeah, like solid story. And yeah, generally like a solid introduction. I will admit, I was kind of funny getting to the end of it and remembering, oh yeah, like they kind of do put it right on the nose that this is going to be a more action oriented Doctor by him literally having a sort of James Bond moment when saying his alias by virtue of saying Smith, Dr. John Smith.
This is something I didn't know until I was rewatching this and looking up facts. They rewrote the script because they saw the shower in that house and they were like, we must use the shower. Unfortunately, that introduced the whole like what's going on with the tattoo question, but I don't think that's really to the episode's detriment at all.
Yeah. I don't even think I ever noticed that tattoo until this watch through.
I've never personally noticed it, but people talk about it. So what's your rating?
An S as well.
Okay. And Aaron?
I'm going to give it an A rating because it is also famous for being one of the scariest episodes of Doctor Who, at least back in the day it was. I know it's terrified the hell out of me as a kid. And when I watched
next one
the reruns in the 80s.
next one that overcame that was its direct sequel, so.
Yeah. So it was I thought that it was actually really cool. Everything from the iconic scene of him falling out of the TARDIS and everything, and him being in the hospital room and just kind of waking up. It's a vulnerability that we hadn't really seen in him yet, you know? So yeah. Yeah, I thought it was really cool.
So I guess with
two S's and an A.
Yeah, I'd say that would make it a low S. So if there's anything that gets like 3 S's across the board, I'll try to put that in front of Spearhead from Space kind of a thing.
I feel vindicated. This is much better than the equivalent of last time. What did we probably got, like 1 S and 2 A's or something like that, whatever comes out to 4.3 or 2 S's and 4 A's, I don't know. All right, next up we have Robot. So the Doctor regenerates after Planet of the Spiders, and this time, hey, it's the same setting again. We're at the unit base. We introduce Harry Sullivan, and we then go through the whole thing with the giant blue screen robot and Marilyn Winters, and I already forgot the name of the organization that they work for.
Oh, I just remember that the initials are SRS, Scientific Research something maybe.
Society, probably.
So yeah.
Which that's
Oh
if
no,
it's Scientific
Reformation.
Research
I don't think
Society.
it's reform.
Oh,
I think
okay.
it's
I was gonna say,
Reformation.
if it's Scientific Research Society, that is the most generic science
Yeah.
society name
Like,
in
and I'm
existence.
and I'm screen sharing, so I can't Google. I'm
Mhm.
realizing.
You know what? I think it might have been like Scientific Reform Society
Yeah.
or something. But yeah, what I think brings this episode down is it's basically, other than the fact that we now have Harry, it's a
Mm.
generic unit episode that happens to start with with a
Mm.
resurrection, with a regeneration. I mean, Tom does all right, but the script isn't super written for him yet at this point.
Yeah.
Um, it's really like, it's a passable episode, but it really just doesn't do anything new, anything stand out. Like
Mm.
regeneration episodes are very often, they're like a special, right? They're a special
Yeah,
event.
Mhm.
They're like they're usually, it's almost like kicking off a new show.
Mm.
Um, and I think Robot really, where it fails is in that area. It doesn't feel like it's doing
Mhm.
anything special. The specialist thing it does is introduce Harry Sullivan.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is harsh. I have it as a C on my list.
Yep. That's me too. I also have
Hmm.
a C.
Mm.
Not to skip ahead of Alex, but
I mean, I think I kind of rearranged it to put you ahead of Alex when I realized Alex was doing tech anyway. But like, what we've been doing seems to be working, so I haven't
yeah.
made a fuss over it.
um, yeah, I will say I remember liking this time through more than previous, but I still would probably cap it at like a B. Um, and I think that's mainly just because I am more interested in this plot than previous. I mean, it is kind of interesting that we've got um fascist villains, but this very specific brand of, we're smart, so we know better kind of villains,
Mhm.
which, it's kind of funny because you could take that as the show doing like what would left-leaning fascism look like, but it could also be right-wing depending. Granted, the doctor, the professor or whatever, willing to go along with it when he's otherwise talking about, renewable energy and all that, could
Hmm.
be leaning in that direction. Um, which is also very interesting because I that was the funny thing of rewatching this, is like, you can tell we're still technically in the Barry Letts era when the Doctor has like a 2-minute kind of rant about how humanity still hasn't latched onto renewable energy yet. Because like environmentalism was a running theme in the Third Doctor era. But yeah, this, like, I've seen the criticism before that this is effectively a Third Doctor story with the Fourth Doctor in it.
Hmm.
Which it does make sense. It is the final story of the Barry Letts tenure. So it does kind of make sense in that way, that especially because we've still got Unit around. And he's driving Betsy and stuff like that, so there are things that bring it down a bit. And like, I will admit, it was funny remembering that there is a door that says absolutely no admittance on it, or something to that effect. And Sarah Jane Smith is like, "Ooh, what's in here?" Because it's like the investigative journalist energy is too strong. She cannot leave the.
Or probably the
No.
last time in Classic Who, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, right, yeah, because given there's like what 3 or 4 stories after this where she gets either brainwashed or replaced by a robot or something, or an android. I mean, but yeah, like funny thing is like as janky as the titular robot in this is, I remember it being worse, but maybe it's just as I get older I'm more forgiving. But like as janky as it is, I can just kind of go with it. There was like one bit, I forget when, but there's like a specific bit that made me just wheeze with laughter, but related to the robot. But I can't remember what it was. But even then, it's like it's one of those ones where like
There's a moment after he grows that you can see through his arm, I think, because of the blue screen effects. I don't know if that's the one you're thinking of or not. It's really only bad when it's once when the robot is grown, of course, because they couldn't do that with practical effects.
right.
But
Yeah. But in any case, I'm like, I feel like if we'd done this like closer to the start of the podcast or something, I probably would have gone way lower. But I'm confident giving it a B, which I guess with 2 C's and a B, that would probably make it a high C.
Yeah. I also felt that was pretty generic. Tom Baker is kind of still getting into the role. The robot's unique looking. You're not going to confuse it for any other type of robot, but it's also the blue screen for it is awful. And you also still have Sarah Jane playing the damsel in distress with her laying on the ground under the robot and stuff too, so.
That's what it was. When the robot grows and is walking around with her in its claw, it's very obviously a doll.
Mm-hmm.
And that set me off laughing. Because it's like, you get why. Because it would have looked like if they'd had her like on a blue screen, like, oh no, let go of me, or whatever. Like, that would have looked so obvious in color.
yeah, or they would have had to do it like a King Kong movie where there's just like a mock-up of the hand, and she stands behind the mock-up of the hand, and that's all you see is her and the hand against like a painting. Next is Castrovalva, and I'm pretty sure when we first reviewed this, I got yelled at for being the negative one. But Castrovalva is basically the tail end of Legopolis. The master won in Legopolis, so now we're like, okay, we still need to, get the master off our backs. Meanwhile, the doctor is going through, a really bad regeneration. All of that going on. Adric is somehow captured, and I don't think it's ever really explained how he got captured, other than the fact that, in Doctor Who, being a teenager that knows math gives you psychic powers. And we'll return to that. So I give Castrovalva a high C. It's
God
not,
damn it, Bill! Stop reading
not,
my mind.
It's not like, oh, this is a bad episode, and it's not even super generic, but it's like it doesn't do anything that excites me. It doesn't do anything that makes it more interesting than a C for me. And I mean, if this was just like Legopolis parts 5 and 6 or something, I don't know how long Legopolis. I literally have the list in front of me.
Both Traken and Legopolis were 4 parts each.
Yeah, Legopolis is only 4 parts, even though I didn't realize. Okay, so yeah, I thought that season finales in that era were 6 parts, but maybe that stopped by this point. So, yeah, if they had called it Oh yeah, I think Shada was going to be the last 6-parter, and then it got axed. So John Nathan Turner was anti-6-parter, I guess. If they had just made Castrovalva into Legopolis parts 5 through 8, I would have been more than fine with that. That would have been ideal for me.
Yeah. I mean, the story itself is effectively the like part 3 of a trilogy of 12 episodes, technically. Like they even package them together in a DVD box set of Traken.
Oh yeah, like the Keeper of Traken. I almost wore out the VHS tape that Traken came on.
But yeah, for me, having only seen this the once, but recently, the main takeaway that I have from this is that Anthony Ainley is extremely underappreciated. At least from what I see. Like, he's usually considered one of the, like, depending on who you ask anyway, there are definitely plenty of circles where he is either considered some people's best master or just generally their personal favorite. Or
the problem is
this, that, or whatever.
He's playing like he's literally like before you even bring Anthony Ainley into it, he's playing the camp version of Roger Delgado.
Right.
So he's always going to be in that position, and that's always going to affect his reputation.
Like I
don't think he did a bad job by any means.
Right. I mean, the main thing that I always enjoyed about Anthony Ainley and the stuff I've seen him in is that when he's, aside from Time Flight, but that's not his fault, especially in this, like the commitment to playing a different role, like when the Master in Delgado's era was playing someone else, he would just be wearing glasses or a different outfit. In here, Anthony Ainley is in full makeup, a fake beard, like hair, the hat, whatever, all that, and is doing it and is putting on a voice. So he's fully committed to portraying this other character. I forgot to check during the credits, but I'm pretty sure they also even actively had his character in that disguise credited under an alias until the episode where the reveal happens, just to like keep up the illusion, which is also nice. But yeah, like it is one of those things where I think even he wanted to portray it more like Delgado, but you know, with what he's got to work with, I think he's doing good stuff. The other most notable thing about this to me, aside from the fact that like I didn't, and this is one of the ones where like, did I love it? No. Did I hate it? No. So it's kind of in the middle somewhere. Is like, I'll put it this way. I'm still thinking of it, but this might end up being the first like across the board C. But the two notes I had for this were that Anthony Ainley's underrated, and also the specific quote of Nyssa saying, "I suppose it's some sort of neutral environment, an isolated space cut off from the rest of the universe." And Tegan responding, "You should have told me that's what he wanted. I could have shown him Brisbane." Which, like, as someone who is from the state Brisbane is in, I still find that quote very funny. So yeah, actually,
so two notes. One, usually when someone says like they wore out a VHS like that, it's followed up with like, "Oh, I had a huge crush on Sarah Sutton or something," and I was sitting here waiting for that.
I did have a huge crush on Adric. I did have a huge crush on Adric.
Okay.
I wore it out because I loved the new opening, like the whole the whole guitar riff, and it's just like it grabs your attention.
Oh,
and
did
I
that
loved
start
it as a
at that
kid.
serial?
I don't know if it started with that serial, but it's the one VHS tape we had of Doctor Who where that was on there.
But the other note the Portreeve is credited as being played by Neil Toynay, which is an anagram of Tony Ainley. And that was, I think that was included in the Radio Times. I'm not sure if the Master was. I mean, the Master is in episode 1, so they probably did make that clear ahead of time. But like, they definitely did not make it obvious ahead of time that they were played by the same person.
Mm.
Right. Anything else to say before we place it?
Mm,
'Cause it sounds like it's being placed potentially below Robot if it's all straight C's and no B's.
yeah, I have mine. I have it square between Robot and another serial, so it's a mid C for me.
Mm.
Okay, so after Castrovalva, we go into the Twin Dilemma, and this is the last one that I rewatched. So it follows after the scene in the previous episode in which the Doctor tried to choke out Perry, and I should have remembered who it was that he claimed she was, but that doesn't happen in this story, although I think people associate them together a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have is the Doctor going through periodic fits of assuming that Perry is an enemy agent. We have once again teenagers who know math being kidnapped because of their wizardly powers. We have a renegade Time Lord that's the master of a planet that the Doctor is perfectly okay with. So we have the Doctor's kind of switched back to his upper class politics here, although that's not necessarily going to stay the case for the whole Sixth Doctor era.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say it wasn't as awful as I would have thought rewatching it. And I don't remember if I made this comment when we reviewed it. Let me see. Our review, we gave it a 1.5 at the time. But the worst part of it by far is the writing for the Doctor and this like constantly like abusing and terrorizing Perry.
Right, yeah.
He's almost, when you like, if you take that part out, he's almost written as like, it's almost written for Tom Baker, and they were like, we want a generic Doctor. We don't know who this Doctor is going to be yet. Let's write it for Tom Baker. Like, I think that was probably their mentality. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say about it. But I have it here as more of like a low C rather than the like D that it kind of is typically thought of as. I just couldn't think of anything other than the Doctor himself to really like seriously penalize the episode for.
Yeah.
Other than of course the parts that are kind of a retread from Castrovalva that I already mentioned.
Yeah, like for me going into this, it has the reputation of being one of the worst classic stories, and then going through it, it's fine. Like, yeah, I could have done without the Doctor choking Perry, and just generally terrorizing her throughout. Like, I could have done without that. You can get across the Doctor being a bit of an asshole without going that far. But otherwise, I was like, this really feels to me like the entire reason this is considered to be as bad as it is purely because it comes out right after Caves of Androzani, which is considered one of the best.
Which is the one that
stories.
does have the choking, by the way. I also just remembered something else weird about this episode. It does have that bit where the slug guy is like, I find her form pleasing. I'm like, really? Do we really need to go there?
But yeah,
he's the only slug guy now that I think about it.
Because yeah, like the fact that it went like Caves of Androzani, which is usually universally loved, to this with some decisions that were not great, and then the season ended, and then people had time to sit with it.
Okay.
Like, because that was like, that's what I keep forgetting, is that it was Caves of Androzani, and then the Twin Dilemma was the last episode, was the last serial of that season, and then the show went on break. So it's like, you left people with the Doctor choking Perry as the final story that season. Not the best look. Like, I think even when I was discussing this with other people, they were like, if Caves of Androzani had been the final story that season, and the only note we had of Colin Baker leading into the next season was he changed my dear, not a moment too soon, and then nothing until Twin Dilemma was like a opening story, sure, people still would have taken umbrage with, you know, how the Doctor treats Perry, and that is absolutely valid. But it probably wouldn't have had as negative a reaction necessarily. Because, like, again, otherwise this is just kind of fine. Like, as far as I'm aware, I forget if it's been outright stated, but the speculation I've seen is that the Sixth Doctor was an attempt to have another go at the arc that the First Doctor had, where he starts off as kind of a bastard, and that, like, you know, like, he almost fucking bludgeons a caveman to death in in the
There
Tribe
is
of
that, and I
Gumstar.
think there was also like a sort of concept of like this, a regeneration gone wrong, and this Doctor isn't the unquestionable good guy sort of thing. Although,
Right.
I mean, Tom Baker could be pretty damn morally gray, at least in dialogue.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
apparently Colin Baker wanted an all-black outfit to match the darker persona they were going with. And
Yeah, and
I
then they
think,
gave him kind of the clown suit.
yeah, apparently post New Who, he has specifically worded it as he wanted Eccleston's outfit. But I think at the
Yeah.
I think at the time he might have just,
I think in an interview he basically said, "I wanted something very similar to what Chris Eccleston ended up with." I think is the exact, as close to the exact quote as I can remember.
yeah. But yeah, like, otherwise, I mean, like, one of the notes I made was just like, for as like fine as I think the story is, I did also have a note of just like Colin Baker's back must hurt from carrying a story this hard. Because it does feel like he's doing the bulk of the work. He is the most entertaining part of the story, which, to be fair, I think is the case for most Doctors in their debut stories. They are usually the main takeaway, even if the story is kind of average. Usually the Doctor is the most notable thing about it. But yeah, could have done without the choking Perry thing. It's not astronomically awful, but it's also not like, oh, a forgotten gem or anything either. So yeah, I'd agree with Bill for a low C.
And Aaron, you already gave all your thoughts, or no?
Oh no, I didn't. I'm
Okay.
actually going to go and give it a D.
Okay.
In that. So yeah, mostly because I did kind of confuse it for the choking Perry uh area, but I don't think it's quite as low of an F, even though it was kind of a disappointment. So, and I just like, it was just an odd thing, as I remember watching it and just being kind of weirded out and really disconcerted with Colin Baker's take on the Doctor. I'm like, wait a second, the Doctor is supposed to be kind of fun and quirky, and he's supposed to know like Venusian Venetian or Venusian was it judo or something? Aikido.
Yeah.
Aikido and everything. He's
Mhm.
supposed to know, like, he's supposed to be kind of part spy, part like mysterious traveler and stuff. He's not supposed to be an asshole.
Mm.
I hate him. So for the longest time, Colin Baker was my least like doctor, and even still, it's kind of hard to get over that. And even with
Mhm.
all the big finish work he's done to kind of try to reverse that image, so or try to remedy it a little bit at least.
Mm.
But one thought on this, I'm looking at the story notes to confirm some of these comments about the Doctor and see if they're here. Colin Baker says one of his reasons why this is his least favorite story of his era is that the twins couldn't act. I very much thought they were intentionally autistic coded.
It wouldn't
I'm
surprise me.
curious how either of you two's reactions to the twins.
To me, they were just kind of there.
Yeah,
Like they could,
that's kind of me too.
yeah. Like they could have been. Wait, like I've seen far worse acting on
I thought they were
Doctor Who.
intentionally going for like the quote unquote savant stereotype of
Mm.
they're very obvious autistic traits with this one special interest that they're very skilled at.
Mm. Could be, yeah. Like I never really thought about it that way, but it wouldn't
Hmm.
surprise me if that was like. Yeah, like it wouldn't surprise me if that was an intentional coding.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, it could also just be that that's just the performance the actors were giving and they didn't have time to get new ones, or it was just like,
Hmm.
well, they're actually twins, so screw it.
Right.
Hmm.
So we've got two C's and a D.
Hmm.
Hmm. Decisions.
Hmm. So I guess that would still. Hmm.
Hmm.
I guess would
And I
I?
guess we could almost just put it there in as a D just so that we're
Hmm.
using every category.
Yeah.
Unless
So I
unless
guess.
we expect multiple D's down the line that are going to be
Hmm.
lower than
I
this.
guess specifically because you and me were giving it a low C, the D could probably counteract that to make it a
Mhm.
high D.
Right.
Hmm.
Whereas if we were giving it
Next.
like
Mhm.
high C's, then maybe it would have just
Right. Oh yeah, for
negated it to a
sure.
low C.
Right. Next we have the twin dilemma, and I'll say I probably think of this very similarly to Time in the Rani. Like they both have these kind of okay stories that, yeah, maybe they don't look the best, but they have a decent concept. Um, Whereas in the Twin Dilemma, the way the Doctor was written was the worst part. In the, I mean, sorry, in yeah, the Twin Dilemma. In Time and the Rani, it's a cliche to say so, but after rewatching it today, I forgot. Yeah, I watched both of them, or I watched both of them this week. But the thing that struck me the most about Time and the Rani was, yeah, it definitely deserves a reputation for the one that has Mel scream way too much. And
Hmm.
at first, I was like, okay, she screams in a couple scenes. Okay, maybe she could stop now. Oh God, it's happening again. Why isn't it stopping? Like that was my progression throughout the story. So it's like,
Hmm.
I mean, there were a lot of constraints, of course, right? So we have the episode starts for some reason the TARDIS is flying through space. I don't know why it's flying through space. It gets
Hmm.
shot at with lasers and crashes, or it doesn't really crash. It just kind of lands.
Hmm.
But everybody inside looks like they've been in a crash landing. We have a Colin Baker who is Sylvester McCoy sized, who flips over and then regenerates into Sylvester McCoy because Colin Baker rightly told them to fuck off after being told, "Hey, well,
Yeah.
you're fired, but do you want to come back and film for 10 minutes?" Um, and then we have they remind us, yeah, this is the Ronnie. Then the Ronnie drugs the doctor, pretends to be Mel, and then we have the rest of the story. And also, I mean, yeah, the brain looks weird. It's kind of what I would have expected on the budget they had at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think Kate Mara did a decent job. It almost seemed like it kind of implies to me that the Ronnie had met Mel before because there are times, especially early on, where she's really doing a passable Mel, and then more and more the Ronnie's personality starts to show through, and it becomes like, that more and more hints that, this definitely is not Mel, and obviously the audience already
Mm.
knows, but it would have been really cool if the Ronnie could like make herself look like Mel, and it was played by Bonnie Langford.
Mm-hmm.
But then there would have been less for Kate O'Mara to do.
Mm.
Um, yeah, the Lacurtians, I could take or leave. And then yeah, the whole thing with the brain would have been great on a post 2005 effects team, but I think it was really a stretch for this effects team and
Mm-hmm.
budget.
Yeah.
Like I said, this fits right there with the twin dilemma for me. I pretty much, that low C high D area. I think they fit
Mm.
exactly together with each other.
Yeah. For me, this is a low C, and it's again, it's one where like me watching it for the first time, knowing that this is another one that is considered one of the. I don't know if I've ever flat out heard it described as like, oh, this is like one of the worst regeneration stories ever, but it's generally.
I think it is. I mean, at least it's largely looked at like it's the Seventh Doctor story that people don't like to talk about unless they hate the Seventh Doctor.
Right.
When it is talked about, it's mainly the oh yeah, shame everything that happened with Colin Baker and Michael Grant. Why am I forgetting his name? Grave, right?
I'm not
Graves with
sure.
an S.
Ah.
Okay. Or no, wait. Why is it giving me all these American people? Damn it, Wikipedia. Um, BBC. Grade with a D. Okay. No wonder.
Mm.
Michael Grade and Colin Baker and all of that. So that's
Mm.
usually all that comes up when people talk about it. That and the screaming thing.
Yeah, like this is very like Twin Dilemma for me, where it's like, is this like a it's like, is this like an overhated classic? No. Um, but it's still like I still think this is like overhated but not underrated kind of a situation of like, I've seen worse. I have absolutely seen worse. Nothing on this list is as bad as the Gunfighters. But at the same time, like, and I think it's a lot of like Sylvester McCoy is fun, Kate O'Mara is fun. I don't like that the Rani is doing a I will be able to control all of time and space thing. Kind of plot,
True,
because
true.
that feels master to me, not Rani. Like,
Although they do put a lot more of a science bent on it than they would in a
right.
master story.
Yeah. It's like, really, if you were changing what her end goal was, the rest of it could basically work. But the fact that she's like, haha, I will have control over all of time and space kind of a thing is like, I could do without that, because that feels like we're very. Now I understand why I have seen people say that, like, by the end of the Rani's run, she had basically become the master in a dress, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because they just didn't know what to do with her, I guess, but they also didn't want to keep using the master like endlessly. So they're just like, well, screw it.
Yeah,
We'll just
and
have.
the whole thing slaving the Lacurtians thing. I
Mm,
forget if that's what she did in Mark of the Rani,
I mean,
but that definitely comes off more master to me than Rani.
uh, I mean, I could see her doing that in the sense of like, well, I need cheap labor, so I'll just enslave these people. Especially because like, while it doesn't entirely come across, because in this story they try to say that she's like emotionally detached despite the fact that she can still obviously get very angry and be sarcastic and all this. I could see her. I mean, like, her debut story was like, oh, well, the people who work for me are unable to sleep because I've been experimenting on them so much. So I'm going to screw over these other people so I can allow my people to actually, like, sleep. So,
Right.
I could see her enslaving people because it's as a means to an end kind of a thing, rather than, haha, I'm ruling over you, more of a sort of capitalist way of thinking of it, of
Right.
like, well, this serves my needs. Kind of a thing. But yeah. Uh but yeah, this is another low C for me. I do feel it's overhated, but it's not exactly like the best story ever either.
Hmm. For me, it's a low D, and you guys kind of talked me out of having it as an F. It was on the F tier for me because I remember watching it, and yet it's also kind of a black hole in my head too, a little bit. But I also remember being kind of really disappointed about it because I didn't like Colin Baker. I didn't like the stories that he was in. It just didn't work out for me. And then Sylvester McCoy came on, and it just felt like it wasn't really a way of recouping that feeling I got with Tom Baker and John Pertwee and even Peter Davidson, that sense of adventure and fun that I had come to associate with Doctor Who just kind of wasn't there. It was a little bit like I liked Sylvester McCoy better than Colin Baker, but and then you've got the Ronnie, but the Ronnie was just kind of weird, like you said, like they didn't know what to do with her, so she just kind of. It was nice to think of her as like a mad scientist in her previous stories, but this, like you said, was just kind of not in character for her to want to crave all this power. Now, if she were experimenting on these people and stuff, then I could understand.
Yeah.
But then it's also, I think, retreading some of her previous stories too. So, but yeah, so I have this as a low D.
Okay, if I said in the low C high D range, Aaron says D, and Alex I don't think has given a rating yet.
Oh, sorry.
I was low C as well. So
You were low C as well. Okay.
effectively two low C's and a low D. I would say probably puts us under Twin Dilemma.
Yeah, it's basically where I have it at.
Okay.
Twin Dilemma has just enough polish on it to be a little bit better than Time and the Ronnie.
Mm-hmm.
Which definitely is not what we rated this when we did the reviews of each. This has a full 1 point above the Twin Dilemma in that score. I'd have to go and see who gave different scores to say
Oh,
to see
God.
why.
My past comes back to haunt me. Because I was reviewing this with you guys.
Oh, okay.
I do remember anyway.
Next is the TV movie.
Hmm.
So we have the weird opening where the Daleks sentence the Master to death and call on the Doctor to bring his remains to Gallifrey, which that part doesn't make any sense. Then we have the fabulous reading room TARDIS. Then the Doctor steps out for some reason into a gang fight and gets shot.
Yeah.
And then he gets killed by the surgeon who refuses to believe the X-ray. And then we have the Paul McGann parts that people tend to remember a bit more because they're the main story. Although this also introduces the Doctor is half human, the Doctor kissing the companion, and the Master taking over bodies like Jason Goes to Hell and referring to the Asian child. And I think I've just listed all the negatives in the episode, and after doing that, it makes it harder to remember the positives. In general, I mean, we gave this a 2.75. I remember not like absolutely hating it the way some people do, but it's also definitely not a high point of the show either. I don't. Yeah, I at that point feels like a broken record to be calling it a low C again. But I mean, it's I don't. I mean, it's if you compare the ratings, it sits right there with Time and the Ronnie on our original review.
Mm,
Mhm.
But better than the Twin Dilemma.
mm.
So yeah, I guess I'm okay with plopping it in that low C area and seeing where the wind takes it.
Well, it's definitely going to be going down because in my mind, this is an F.
Mhm.
Uh,
Okay, and this is
like
your first
I,
watch, is that right?
yep. Like if I might soften on it on like if I ever watch it again, but my god, they did like knowing what I know. Like if I'd gone into this having seen none of the McCoy era, or I had only seen his McCoy's first season, I would probably be okay with how McCoy is handled in this, but they did him so dirty. This is the chess master doctor by the
Yep.
end of his run, and he steps out of the TARDIS without checking and gets shot dead. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, I hate that so much. Like, that makes it. I really do believe that either A, this should have started with him being brought into the hospital, or B, it should have just started with McGann. And really, it should have just started with
Hmm.
McGann. And you just leave it open to interpretation how long it's been since the regeneration happened. Maybe you imply that it just happened, but you don't say how. You know, which would have let I like literally one of my last notes is Big Finish could not come into existence fast enough to rectify this injustice. like like my god. And like yeah, I also thought pretty immediately that this feels like Jason Goes to Hell meets Terminator as far as what they're doing with the Master. Like they literally like the bit where he says the Asian child is straight up a shot out of Terminator, like the first Terminator movie. And like he's walking around like the Terminator at first. He has the friggin' glowing green cat eyes for some reason. Um, and then like randomly he
I think it's
switches
supposed
into
to be
being
Snake Eyes,
yeah, Snake Eyes.
which even
Um,
still, the master is not the Mara.
right,
Mhm.
yeah, like the
I
the
remember that definitely came up in our review of it.
yeah, like the Master's never had weird glowy eyes. I've also just said that like clearly by now between this and what I've seen of Miracle Day so far, can we please just not allow the US to have any involvement in Doctor Who in actual production, because this is what happens. You
Yep.
get this and you get Miracle Day.
Well, wasn't
Like,
this also supposed to be kind of the setup for an Americanized Doctor Who
yeah,
series,
this
I
is
thought?
yeah, this is supposed to be a pilot for a revival that never happened, and that it was
Hmm.
supposed to be a co-production between the BBC and
Yeah,
whatever network in the US is aired on.
Fox, I
and
believe.
Hmm.
it's relevant. I think this got the figures they were expecting from the UK audience, but the American audience just wasn't interested.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So like this felt Americanized to me, and it's like, no. Doctor Who is
Yeah.
such an inherently British thing that I just balk at that, and like, like as someone who's not from there anyway, I'm just like, no, like they've done this before with other things, and it never works out right. Like, um, the person who wrote Reverend W. Audrey, who wrote the Railway series, which is what Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends is based on, effectively
Mm-hmm.
said at one point that when the Americans get a hold of it, they're going to ruin it. Sure enough,
Mm-hmm.
the Americans did get a hold of that franchise and drove it into the ground. But in any case,
Mm.
this is just, ugh. I do not have like again to be positive. Paul McGann is doing his best, like, and like it is one of those things where if I was being really cruel, I would count his first Big Finish story as his first story and not this. Because I just don't like this to such a degree. But again, like I might soften on it with time. Like there are some bits that are legitimately funny rather than like this is so bad that it's funny. But yeah, it's just like, oh, this was rough to get through, especially because like it's kind of annoying because like technically we've had the master like switch bodies before and whatever, but
Yeah.
did we really have to do the Jason Goes to Hell thing? Like
I've never seen Jason Goes to Hell, but body snatching stuff like that just grosses me out, especially when it comes to alien body snatching.
Yeah. Like, to be honest, I went along with it in Jason Goes to Hell when I finally saw that. But to be fair, the movie preceding it was so bad and dull that I was just happy for Jason Goes to Hell to be like entertainingly weird and like batshit. So
Would I describe Jason X as dull?
the movie that came before it, I
Oh
mean.
no way, Jason X
Yeah.
follows it, doesn't it? It doesn't come
Yeah.
before it. Okay.
Jason Takes Manhattan is
So
what they
Manhattan.
yeah. But yeah, like yeah. I can see why this has the reputation it has. I am very glad that Paul McGann was redeemed through Big Finish. So yeah, this gets an F for me.
For me, this started as a B, and then listening to Alex describe it, and then remembering just how horribly disappointed I was. I try to look at this movie through rose-tinted glasses, but Alex is right. Like I had actually come to really enjoy Sylvester McCoy and his show because it was the last bit of Doctor Who I remember seeing on PBS. And so hearing about this movie being out, I was so excited to hear it out. I got a bootleg copy from Gen Con in Milwaukee back in like 2000 or something, like on VHS, and brought it home and watched it. And it was just the most disappointing thing I've ever seen.
I mean, by 2000 there were legal copies out.
Were there legal copies? I don't think anything I
Unless it
bought
was,
it.
I'm sure it was released on VHS in the US, right?
I don't think so because I don't think anything I bought at Gen Con that year was a legal copy of anything. I think they had vendors that were just flat out selling bootlegs of everything there. And that's where I got my Sailor Moon Sailor Stars VHS tapes. So I could actually see the last 4 episodes of that series finally. Because I didn't have access to the internet. I had access to it, but I couldn't download the bootleg fan sub version. I had to actually buy it on VHS. But yeah. Yeah, this is one of those movies I bought and brought it home, was all excited. I also got some bootleg copies of Blake 7 and everything too. And those were better than
I hope
this.
there's
And
a statute of limitations with the amount that you're listing.
I hope so too. Eh, I've lived a good life, right?
I mean, it's 10 years in the US, isn't it, usually?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think so anyway. I mean, a friend bought it for me. But yeah, the TV movie, I try to look at it positively as like, hey, we got a Doctor Who TV movie in the 90s. And then it's just like, but was it really any good? And the answer is no. The slug master really creeps me out. I don't like the whole body alien. It's one thing for like have demon possession and stuff because usually the victim can be recovered or the demon can be exorcised and the victim winds up being relatively okay. But usually with alien possession stories, the victim has to be killed in order to stop, the alien menace and stuff. I grew up watching the War of the Worlds TV series, which really pushed the horror boundary on television. But yeah, it was just that really grossed me out. I didn't like how they offed Sylvester McCoy. I thought that was just dumb. And I don't know, like Paul McGann didn't really have a lot of. I mean, it was interesting to see an actual romantic relationship between him and one of his companions. The last time I remember seeing that was with Romana 2, especially because the actors were actually dating at the time. Around that time when that was out. So, but yeah, I guess that was a little bit interesting, and I like kind of how they had a little bit more of a budget. And the reading room TARDIS was pretty awesome, but yeah, it's a high D for me, I should say, before I keep rambling on.
Yeah, and on that note, we probably should start covering these a little more quickly so that we're not here for
Right.
3 hours.
This was supposed to be
So-
our short show.
Yeah, but unfortunately, every time it's like that, that means that I'm not timing it. And whenever I'm
Uh-oh.
not timing it, we go on tangents.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So we've got a C, a D, and an F. So I guess that would probably
Average out to a
have it.
D.
Yeah, a low D.
More Ds than I expected. See if it's the last or not. Next, we have Rose, which took some of Alex's advice and did not start with Paul McGann being machine gunned. It's kind of they revisit the Autons because they're like, hey, this is what regeneration stories are like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Introducing Doctor Who to a new generation. Some wonky effects. I particularly think of the trash can that eats Mickey.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty. Let me go back to my list, and yeah, I've got that along with a lot. Most of the stories from here on are all in the same category without any particular order. I've got that plonked somewhere in the B range, not especially high or low.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me personally, this is a C, mainly just because I feel like this is one of RTD's weaker stories. Like, I don't know, it's just like Rose not realizing that there's something wrong with Mickey when it's the Auton Mickey. Just like, what are we doing? I get
Mm-hmm.
I get she's supposed to be a working class every woman, but like, come on, she can't be that thick. Like, that's a bit silly. Like, he doesn't even look exactly the same. I think his skin tone's a bit off, and
Mm-hmm.
like, just also a hell of a lot more smooth and all that. And it's just like, come on, she'd notice. Like, ironically, the facsimile in Spearhead from Space looks more believable. Like, the skin tone is a bit darker by virtue
Yes.
of being plastic, but in the 70s they made they did him up to be a better
Well, yeah, in the
facsimile.
70s they used practical effects. For some
Right.
reason, the Nestine consciousness switched to CGI in 2005.
But yeah, like, I don't know. It's just like, it's not bad enough to go into like DRF by any stretch, but for me it's like, God, I don't even know if I'd say it's a high C. It might be a like, probably for me it'd probably be like. Actually, I guess with what we've got in C at the moment, which is where I would have had those two stories anyway, I probably would still have it above Robot and Castrovalva, so high C by default. But yeah.
Okay, Aaron?
All right, I have this as a low B for me. The special effects are a little bit wonky, and the writing and characterizations they're kind of warming up. A lot of these characters, like even the Doctor himself, is kind of, I guess he's not really one dimensional, but Rose certainly is right now. So she grows throughout the series, of course. So gets better, but like right now she's a bit flat. And everything is kind of not quite fully cooked. They're still kind of testing the waters, I feel. So,
This is an example of both of like growing over time and of how the formats differ. Because if we
Yeah.
just took the original ranking and translated it directly over, it would be a low A. It was a 4.0, and none of us even came close to that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Instead, yeah, average out to a low B.
Yep.
Next, we've got the 11th Hour. So this, yeah, the debut of, no, we don't. No, we don't. We have the Christmas Invasion, the Christmas special, because they didn't want to kill the Doctor and then wait until the start of the next season before introducing a new Doctor. And this one, it's not super memorable for me. It's one that I probably could have stood to rewatch. But I take that as, not necessarily being quite up in like the A territory. But it's not bad either. The obviously the like sword fight at the end is the memorable part that everyone likes to quote a lot.
Mm.
So I guess maybe high B.
Mm. Yeah, like for me, Rose is less annoying in this story, which thank God, given what ends up happening with her in 10. Like Jackie is more tolerable in this story than she usually can be. Harriet Jones, Prime Minister, yes, we know who you are, is still funny to me. Like, as much as that joke comes up in this story, I was assuming that it would eventually get old, but no, I always, I did find it funny every time. Uh,
Oh yeah, this is kind of the one where the Doctor is like, "I'm mad at you, so I'm going to weaponize misogyny against you," which I'm still not sure. Like, when people criticize episodes for that, I'm still not sure how I feel in terms of using existing societal problems as a weapon. But yeah,
I mean, they do kind of hint. I forget exactly what the dialogue is, but the Doctor does have a moment of like, "Oh, I guess I'm mean now." Of like, I think
rude and
he
not
calls out.
ginger.
Yeah, like he calls out Rose for something, and like I forget if he calls her useless or something like that. Um, or something like that, and then he's immediately like, "Oh, is that who I am now?" Um, and all that. But yeah, like I also just like that, like of the regenerations we've talked about thus far, I think there's only like one where he's conked out this long, and this one makes the most sense to me. Given that, like, he took the friggin' all that energy from the TARDIS into himself and then put it back, is like, yeah, that's a pretty big deal. So like him being knocked out, like him being out of action for a good chunk of the story makes a lot of sense. um I could do without, like, the most annoying Rose moment for me in this is the bit where it's like, "Oh, I thought I knew him," and then he goes and does this, and I'm like, he kind of died saving your life, so that comes off as a bit weird. Like, I get the point they were kind of trying to make, but it's also just like, it's a weird kind of flex to be like, "Oh damn, I thought I knew him, and then he went and died and changed his face. How dare he?" Is like how it kind of comes off as. So it's a bit, that could have been handled a bit better. Um, but yeah, like I've kind of soured on 10 a bit, but that's not his fault. That's purely how what RTD ends up doing with him. So I would probably also say this is a high B. I would definitely put this above Rose.
I do have this also as a high B as well. So, I do remember it has a few iconic moments in it. One, well, obviously the sword fight, but the other one for me is the people standing on the rooftops, being controlled by their blood type, which I felt was actually really pretty unique. I hadn't really heard of that before, and it made pretty good, pretty much sense for me. Um, while not being like sciencey. So yeah, a high B just for
Mhm.
and also, the fact that, the doctor is still stumbling around in that while also being kind of knocked out. So he's there but not until the end.
Mm.
And also Harriet and also the first mention I think of Torchwood.
Yes.
Mhm. So, yeah, pretty cool.
So yeah, that's only interestingly
Mhm.
enough, only the second B
Hmm.
so far.
Which moves us on to the 11th hour. So this is Stephen Moffat's debut. That's crashing the TARDIS in what I think is supposed to be the past, although I don't remember the episode saying so, but it's treated as Amy being more contemporary with the viewer.
Mm.
Then back to the modern day. Not supposed I don't need to just give a full summary, but yeah, we have the introduction of the crack storyline. We have that whole I think for the first time we have that doctor montage of, showing all the doctors and, I'm the doctor and that's why you should fear me, which is
Mm.
kind of part of the whole Pandorica plot line as well.
Mhm.
Um, and I've got to say, like, I put this up there as an S episode, especially if you're comparing it to other Doctor's first stories. Like, this is one of those where, it's perfect for new viewers. It's perfect for returning fans. It really gets me energized to watch more Doctor Who. And, it's not the most exciting episode out there, but it has that something that pulls me in and, gets me excited for it.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I will say this is one I didn't end up having time to rewatch, but I've seen it enough times that I felt that I could uh make a solid enough call regardless. Because I remember this one being one of my favorite Moffat written stories in general. And like Amy and Rory are both fun right out the gate. Um, this is also before, while they do the whole "the girl who waited" thing with Amy. At least here it's fine.
Mhm.
God knows they do some
It's not
if you
overused at this point, for sure.
yeah. Plus it's like this obviously is not taking into account what they do with Amy later. um, which can be a bit but yeah. Um, the dynamic between those three is also fun, and like I forget, like it just kind of funnily enough it like the "Hello, I'm the Doctor" basically run thing like came up. Someone had clipped it on uh Twitter, and I think it was like them saying that like this was the moment for that person where they actually wanted to go back and watch like all of classic and just everything that had come before 11. And I'm like, even just watching that clip, because I hadn't seen that scene in a while I hate that they kind of overdo the Doctor banking on their reputation now, um that and one instance of when 10 does it still hit for me, and the "Hello, I'm
Mhm.
the Doctor" basically run does actually still give me chills. So this for
Even
me,
though that one was an example of the Doctor, like, banking too much on their
yeah,
reputation and actually getting his ass beat.
right, like it was like I think it's pretty much just this and like Silence in the Library are the two instances where I'm like, okay, I'm fine with it here. It kind of gets overdone later, but this is one of those instances where I'm okay with it. Um So I would either give this a low S or a high A.
Okay, so I'm giving it a mid to high A as well. Just because it is like you said, it's post Tenet, which I had a hard time getting into Tenet just because of the fans surrounding him were just so adamant. I wouldn't say they were toxic, but they were very adamant that he was like the best doctor ever. And I'm like, well, he's going to be replaced eventually, right? And
I
this
think he
was
still is the fan favorite, though.
Hmm.
yeah, he still is.
And I
Except for
mean,
me.
he's also
Like,
RTD's favorite, so that
Yeah.
does.
yeah, personally he's not my favorite doctor. My favorite is of course Tom Baker, followed by John Pertwee, and Peter Capaldi and a few of the others. I also like Jodie Whittaker as well. Um but like this actually got me excited to see what the future was beyond RTD uh and um and David Tennant and stuff. And of course, we were eventually horribly disappointed by that future, but this we didn't know that when I didn't know that when I watched this episode, and this had a lot of promise to it, and it was just quirky and entertaining, and held a lot of mystery to it. The whole fish and custard thing was big for a while. Like even I believe
Yeah,
Randy himself tried eating fish and custard for a bit. So, but yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a memorable episode, and it's one that I would probably still go back and enjoy watching.
So between an S, a low S, high A, and a high A, I'd say that probably rounds out to about a low S.
that's fair.
Yeah.
And I just realized we skipped over the War Doctor because he's.
Hmm.
I just reset, or I made a new tab with my own list so I could see them in the order that Alex sees them, which the audience can't see because of the way the screen is. And
Oh,
Day of the Doctor was like 3 stories ago because
Hmm.
he's the 8.5 Doctor.
Well, I guess to be fair,
oh, yeah,
to
that's right.
to be fair, if we do it now, then we're at least doing it in like
Yeah,
chronological in
now we're doing
terms
it in
of.
chronological order if we do it next.
Yeah.
So Day of the Doctor. We have the War Doctor. We find out, he's the doctor who didn't want to be called the Doctor, and then he accepts being called the Doctor just in time to die. This does involve a bit of Rose stuff that Aaron might hate.
No, actually, it's the part of Rose that I actually enjoy
Okay.
immensely.
It's Clara not having her whole plot affect everything. And yeah, I pretty sure I know where I put this. Yeah, this is one of my S's. It's you can nitpick this story, but I don't think you can deny that it's damn good Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I think Lucas was the one who had the most criticisms of it when we reviewed it, but
Yeah, like I think the only reason I think when I remember looking through it was that like two people that left after the fact both ranked it low, but everyone else who was there at the time gave it a 5 or something. But yeah, I would also definitely give this an S. This is another one that I didn't get around to rewatching, but I've seen enough times
yeah,
that
I didn't need to rewatch this. It's
yeah,
vivid in my memory.
yeah, it's like as much as I had issues with how 10 was handled in his run, this is there's kind of like there's like a flat out bit where it's kind of lampshading how he's doing the whole oncoming storm spiel, and then it's like, oh, you're just a rabbit or whatever. Or like and stuff like that, and finally getting a callback to the is it the Shakespeare Code where like Queen Elizabeth doesn't like him?
Oh, I think because Shakespeare was in the Elizabethan era. Yep,
Yeah, because
I think that was
yeah,
Shakespeare code,
yeah, where like old Queen.
and also specifically a callback to, um, is it Waters of Mars?
Uh,
What's right before the end of time? I have that book.
I think it is Waters of Mars.
Either Waters of Mars or Planet of Death, where he's like the Virgin Queen is the Virgin, can no longer use that name or something.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I'd
Which,
say,
it's shocking that he got away with that.
yeah.
Still,
Yeah, I think
it
it's,
was the Waters of
yeah.
Mars.
I was gonna say because that does feel with his whole spiel at the end of that. Feels very leading into End of Time. But yeah, like between that and John Hurt just being great, um, it is one of those ones where like I wish it had been either like it had been an existing Doctor. We were not gonna get Eccleston at the time. He might have been more
Mhm.
willing to work with Stephen Moffat, but at the same time, either he wasn't asked, or even if he was, he probably. I think he said that he probably
I
still would
think
have
he
said
turned
no.
it down.
Yeah. I feel like I've heard that he said he wasn't necessarily asked, but that he probably still would have turned it
Oh,
down at the time. Because the
maybe his
like
agent
the
said no. I don't know.
because I think
Mhm.
it was like the feelings was still a bit too raw then for him to be keen to. But in either case, it's almost a bit disappointing that it wasn't McGann. To get him on screen on TV
Mhm.
again.
Hmm.
For the first time in forever. Um, to the point that I hope he does get a multi-doctor story on TV at some point. But that being said, it's one of those things where even that's a nitpick because like Moffat does take into account, okay, that means that Matt Smith is now the end of the regeneration cycle.
Hmm.
Um, given he also canonizes the Metacrisis Doctor as a regeneration.
Yep.
But yeah, like this is very solid. Um, still, I would argue. I mean, I'd have to go back through and rewatch the Three Doctors. I've never seen the Five Doctors. Um, but I would say this is probably also just generally the most solid anniversary story in terms of like the actual like marquee every 10 years kind of thing.
Mhm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, this might actually top the list for me as a
Mhm.
high S.
Um, it certainly does for me. This is the only S on my list. Just like Time and the Ronnie would have been the only F if I hadn't gone soft on it. Um, but yeah, this is like everything in this just really came together for me. The three doctors. I actually do like the scenes with Rose because she's so kind of out of place here, especially with the war doctor. To have him hallucinate her kind of it elevates her from just this woman who's in love with the doctor. She's now like
Mm,
this weird image, this thought in and of itself.
mm,
So, she's kind of transcended the character of Rose at this point. So it was
mm,
actually kind of fun to see her return. And not exactly as Rose, but as a Rose like being
yeah.
that is almost godlike at this point. Um or a part of the universe, I should say. So
Mm,
it was just like and with this being a doctor in the past, it's actually a bit of interesting foreshadowing concerning Tennant's doctor. So
mm,
yeah, and as that's the case, it would have been really cool to see Eccleston here. So but yeah, it's so good that I keep forgetting that it's a part of Doctor Who. It feels like it's it again, speaking of transcendence, it feels like this story is beyond Doctor Who. So, it even I believe this one even brings back the Zygons.
Yep.
Yep.
And it also has Tom Baker, an elderly Tom Baker come back, and I haven't seen him,
Mm.
beyond Big Finish. We haven't seen him on screen as the Doctor in decades.
Mm.
Right.
And this would have been before he
So,
came back for Big Finish as well, I think.
I mean,
hmm.
unless you count the 30th anniversary, which we
Mhm.
don't.
So, yeah. This is just it's above and beyond.
Oh,
It's the top of
I
my
just realized
list.
I say that, but this is 20 years after the 30th anniversary. So even if we counted it, which we don't, it's still been decades.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely a must see. If you watch anything of Doctor Who, just watch Day of the Doctor, and it actually
Mm.
kind of made me tear up and everything just with how kind of dreamlike it is. So,
Mm.
I really like it.
All right, next up is Deep Breath. And I know we didn't start right away, but we've been streaming for just shy of 2 hours now, so we'll probably try to limit the amount of detail we go into. Deep
Mhm.
Breath.
Mhm.
It really kind of just feels like a seventh Doctor story. I mean, an 11th Doctor story to me. There
Mhm.
is some regeneration stuff, right? He talks about like, why am I using this face again? Although I don't think he ever actually answers why. There's some
Mm.
funny stuff with the attack eyebrows and all of that. So, classic regeneration stuff. I will never forget the placeholder audio in the leaked copy that had the bagpipes playing for some of the music that because they didn't have Capaldi's theme yet. But we can't actually rate it based on that. It might be an S if we include the bagpipes. Um, but I think this goes somewhere in the B range for me.
I do not recall what my thoughts were on Deep Breath originally, but from this rewatch, like, I forgot how much I enjoyed the Paternoster gang. So it was kind of
Mhm.
nice to see them again. I love that the death of the villain is kept ambiguous as to whether or not the Doctor pushed him or he threw himself out. And I don't think they ever clarify, because even like Missy in like the sort of coda is like, I couldn't even tell, like even from where I am, I couldn't tell what happened. Kind of a thing. I like that they keep that ambiguous. To keep you guessing, because again, effectively what they're doing with Capaldi is what they were trying to do with Colin Baker, but better
Mhm.
handled.
Mhm.
Of like a grumpy Doctor who eventually mellows out, kind of a thing. Uh I feel like I found the villain a bit more interesting this time through. Like, not as like, oh my god, this is an amazing villain, but and just like the idea, I love the notion of the the Doctor's veil being lifted, like that whole discussion where it's like the Doctor is now effectively showing his age in a way, as like pretending to be a young man
Mm.
as Matt Smith, and now it's like the veil has been lifted and it's like you see the old man.
Mhm.
um is very fun. I also did like I honestly completely forgot about it until my rewatch, so I'm glad I did. That there's a little Matt Smith cameo where prior to regenerating he preemptively calls Clara um in a way that it'll get to her post regeneration. That was very touching. So for me, I think this will be an A.
For me, it's a B, mid B. Not quite as good I remember being a little bit disappointed by it, thinking that it was going to be really good, kind of a nice uptick from Matt Smith, and kind of like with Sylvester McCoy, I was kind of disappointed with the transition. Got better towards the end of his run, of course. But I still enjoyed this when it came out. I like the Paternoster game. I like the Victorian setting and stuff. Um, yeah, and then of course the attack eyebrows as well, as mentioned.
So let's
So
see.
that's two B's and an A.
So were you specifically a high B bill, or was it a more of a mid to
Not
low?
really specified, yeah.
Because I'm just
So I think the
thinking,
average probably comes out to like top of the B's, maybe.
yeah.
B.
So above. Oh my god, it does not want to budge. I'll have to move that. So there we go.
Okay.
Okay, so next we have The Woman Who Fell to Earth. So this is the start of the Chibnall era. Jodie Whittaker, dressed as Peter Capaldi, falls out of the TARDIS and lands in a train in Sheffield. Mainly focused on, her name is Ruth, right? Or is that the fugitive doctor?
Yeah, it's
Or are
fugitive
they both
doctor.
Ruth?
Grace is
Grace. Okay,
Graham's wife.
there we go. I knew there was an R, I guess. And I just searched for Grace as though that was going to find anything on Google.
I mean,
Yeah, so it's
even with Doctor Who, would be a bit confusing because it'd be like, do you mean the TV movie companion?
yeah, fair point. So yeah, it's largely focused on Grace, and at the time, of course, I was just like, why do we have all this focus on her and then kill her? Is this just going to be misused character? But it really is more like she's kind of set up as like she'd be such a good companion that like the other three would feel like they weren't on the TARDIS at all. Um, as to how I feel about the story, I hate to be repetitive, but this is another one that just kind of feels like a B to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I did not rewatch it, but it just it kind of feels like it drags on. Like there's so much going on with like building the sonic screwdriver and all of that that it kind of just feels like, okay, when are we going to get to resolving the main plot of the episode? So that's what brings it down for me from being an A episode.
This was one I didn't rewatch, but I've rewatched it recently enough that I didn't feel like I needed to. At least that it's enough has stuck with me that I didn't feel like I had to. This is one where
Oh, I just realized if you click pin images, the ones at the bottom are always stay on screen.
Oh, okay. Uh, yeah, like I wish Grace had lived because otherwise it feels like she's just kind of, in a way the term fridged gets thrown around a bit too much, but I would argue that she is effectively fridged to serve
You would still argue that,
Graham.
or you would
Yeah,
at the time?
I would argue it
Okay.
now more, like, especially in retrospect, because she, like, when this first aired, I wouldn't have necessarily, because we didn't know where that was going.
Mm-hmm.
But Graham's story throughout the whole series is coming to terms with her death. So I'll put it this way, it's like, it's not the most egregious fridging ever. There are definitely worse examples. Probably even within Doctor Who for all I can remember. But it's like, in a way, and it's nothing against Yaz and Ryan, it would have honestly been very fun if the companions were Graham and Grace. Just an old couple in the TARDIS. To like get to as a change of pace from pretty much always having young companions.
Mm.
I will say I did like the Doctor building the Sonic scene, but mainly just because I remember some of, like, I think both 11 and 12, just kind of the TARDIS just kind of spits one out for them to use. Um, as opposed to, or just like they get a new one off screen, so it's nice to actually see 13 make one. Especially because it's set in a working class place like Sheffield, that it's like, that makes sense. Um, and I think this is also like the first time we ever actually see the Doctor put one together, so that's always kind of nice. Jodie's fun. It's very like, in hindsight, I feel like I kind of agree that she kind of looks better in Capaldi's outfit, but at the same time, I guess they are kind of going for like cool aunt energy. So the outfit she ends up with is nice. Like in hindsight, I'm kind of glad that they didn't go with like a very formal dress or anything, because that would have felt
Oh
like
yeah,
both one,
that
two,
would not have fit her at all.
right. It would have felt too on the nose, and also it makes more sense for that to happen with Missy because it's the Master being very misogynistic and very, well, of course this is how women dress. So yeah, but I would give it, I'd probably give this like a B, and like a, honestly, I would probably put this above Christmas Invasion, but under Deep Breath.
All right. I gave this kind of a middle to low A. Just because I kind of like the whole building the going into like the little bits of building the sonic screwdriver. It seems to be something that kind of picked up in that got picked up in science fiction as a whole, where we start seeing people like actually building like their spaceships, like in the Mandalorian. Was it Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett? It's one of those. We see them actually build a spaceship, or like Iron Man building his suits and stuff. They get into the more detailed parts of that. I didn't mind the companions, and the story was pretty good. I do remember the teeth villain, so yeah, and of course, I do like Jodie Whittaker. I thought she really came in swinging with this one. So, yep, that's my idea.
So we've got two
So,
B's and a low A.
so that would probably actually put it above Deep Breath, I think.
Okay. Then we have the Star Beast. So here we have remake of a classic 80s story. We have the return of Donna. We have Donna's kid who is older than she should be, but otherwise is, pretty enjoyable character. We have, of course, everything to do with the Meep. And I think maybe more just because of like how good this looks. Like it's kind of a typical story, but it's like Day of the Doctor level quality and visuals. As far as I can remember, like I put this story as an A, and that's probably the best justification I can give it. Other than like, I don't really like. There are complaints to have about this episode, and I don't remember my specific rating, but I mostly remember it being pretty good. Although we did rate it below a 4 on average, so maybe there are things I'm not remembering.
Yeah, for me, this is, if I really wanted to be mean, I could give this an F, but for me, this is more of a D. And a lot of that is, I hate the dead naming thing. Again, there were better ways to handle that. The scene directly after that does that better. And like, obviously putting that out there, different people are going to have different
That did
stances
not
on
stop
that.
you from giving an A when it came out, but I guess it's festered for some time.
Right. Like, I think it was one of those things where, like, at the time, enough of it I liked that like dragged it down for being higher than it was. But now that I've had time to sit with it and he's made similar mistakes in a way since, I'm like, yeah, like Beep the Meep is interesting. I don't like the magic wand Sonic.
Mm.
Like we're like, he's now able to make, and it's literally only in that story. I don't know why. But it's weird that like 14 does not do anything like that ever again. So it
True, true.
really feels completely pointless that it's just a magic wand for this story. To that end, I honestly would have preferred if they'd introduced another gadget aside from the sonic screwdriver. Like if the doctor is supposed to be enough of a tech whiz now, you could just come up with a new device aside from the Sonic that can do stuff like that, and I probably would have given it a pass. It's just making the Sonic do literally all this kind of stuff is like, okay, that's a bit much.
Like Matt Smith had a lot of devices that go ding and things like that, and then now everything is just it's a screwdriver.
Yeah. Shelly is fun, so I'm glad that we know that she'll be coming back at some point. I wish that like a Rose Noble, or Temple Noble, I forget how the surname works with her. I wish that she'd had a different name, because you have to always clarify now that you mean Donna's kid and not
Yep.
Rose Tyler. I mean, thankfully it's not two white people, so you can at least differentiate that way as well. But it's just like, and the whole thing of RTD seemingly not understanding what non-binary is, as a non-binary person, was like, do you could you
He
can
did
you
seem to
consult
think
people?
trans and non-binary were pretty much synonyms.
Yeah, like I can't tell if he's saying that like because of the meta crisis stuff, Rose Noble is non-binary, and once that goes away, she isn't, because she only ever gets addressed as she. She's referred to as a daughter, which, to be fair, there are trans femme non-binary people who will still use feminine words like that to describe themselves rather than neutral.
I'm not going to say this isn't a tangent worth going
but yeah.
on, but we're over time.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time.
Right,
so,
yeah. Basically,
yeah.
for my full complaints on that, go watch the review we did. But yeah, this is like a D for me.
It's a high C for me. I just didn't like a lot of the cliche that was involved. Of course, the cute creature is a monster that needs to be defeated. The most unique thing was the idea of the of Rose creating like the little like stuffed animals, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Out of the monsters from the stories that Donna has told her daughter. So I thought that was pretty cool. And also the reintroduction of Dr. Donna, while not, not killing her, showing that Donna can be rescued. The whole thing with the trans person, I didn't even, all of that flew right over my head. I thought she was a very tall woman. And like it just went over my head completely. And I'm like, why is this person yeah, I don't know. So I feel sorry for that. Obviously for not being observant enough. But yep, C, high C for me.
So was it an A for you, Bill, or was that a B?
Yeah, A.
So an A, an F, and a C. Oh no. And a C. So I think that would just qualify as a high C then.
Okay.
So above Robot.
Definitely a demotion from high B when we reviewed it. But it's not the only one. It's not the first demotion.
Also, I want to mention that David Tennant looks very tired in this. He's looking older and more haggard.
Yeah, he's been a father for many years since.
I mean, it is. Yeah, it is like literally 10 years since his last appearance in the shows.
And I know people in the theater were talking about how tired and haggard he looked in Day of the Doctor. So
Mm.
Day of the Doctor is a little worse because he's supposed to be plucked out of
Yeah.
season 4, series 4.5.
Yeah.
All right, The Church on Ruby Road. So this is the episode. It's borderline musical, introducing magic to the world. First appearance of Ruby. First full episode, of course, of Shurigatwa, because otherwise it wouldn't be on this list. First episode. No, it's not the first episode of the RTD2 era. But it is kind of the new paradigm post Toymaker.
Mm.
And probably a high B for me. I mean, it's a really fun episode. There are definitely more engaging and a lot, more interesting episodes. So it's difficult for me to put it in A, maybe a low A, but it's also like I feel like it was a fun enough episode. It's hard for me to put it below a high B.
Yeah, it's like it's one of those ones where like it's the thing stopping it from going higher than a B is more so like lack of oomph rather than
Oh, and I should say,
problems.
Ruby is probably more interesting in this episode than she is in her season.
Yeah.
Like she comes off, potentially really interesting. It just doesn't really get built on,
Right.
other than the snow thing, which ends up going nowhere.
Yeah, like I'd probably say this is a high B as well. It's like I can't remember what my thoughts at the time were because it's been long enough, but I remember just finding this kind of like, it's okay, rather than like it didn't blow me away, but it also didn't have like. I feel like the most glaring issue I had was that like that baby was so dead from that fall. Like the doctor catches her, but it's like
At
come
least it's the
on.
magic gloves.
Right, but even then, it's just kind of like, I don't, even for Doctor Who logic, I don't know if I can entirely
I
buy
don't know if
that.
that's how Mavity works.
But yeah, like, aside from that, like, Shooty's fun. This is a very fresh take, on the Doctor. I love him and Ruby's dynamic. Thankfully, like I even have like one of my notes is just that Ruby thankfully isn't Rose Tyler 2.0 despite being a blonde living in London. Like that was one of my biggest worries, and thankfully they didn't go for that. So yeah, high B for me.
I'm going to go low A for me because I felt like the show took a lot of risks and they didn't all like come together. Like the song and dance was okay, but it was also kind of a little goofy and out of place, but it was charming enough that for the one episode I could tolerate it. And the goblin the
Goofy and out
goblin
of place is RTD's middle name.
yeah.
I mean,
It
he's the
was
one
just
who brought Pigmen into Doctor Who 2 or 3 times.
yeah, this was I thought it was nice, cheery, change of pace. I like Shooty Gatwa. I love Ruby. Um, I like Ruby's living situation where she's adopted by a very different parent, by a very different woman, and and her own grandmother and everything. So, yeah, it's I enjoyed it. So low A for me.
Okay, so
All
just
right, so
as
that is
I guess I'll just do a very like rapid fire run through. So at S we have
okay.
Day of the Doctor, Power of the Daleks, Spearhead from Space, and 11th Hour. At an A, all on its own, we have An Unearthly Child. At B, Church on Ruby
That's
Road.
because nobody else watched episode 2.
So yeah, B, Church on Ruby Road, Woman Who Fell to Earth, Deep Breath, Christmas Invasion, Rose. So basically everything from new that isn't 11th Hour, aside from Star Beast. Speaking of which, C, the Star Beast, Robot, and Castrovalva. And finally at D, the Twin Dilemma, Time and the Rani, and the TV movie. And nothing in F.
Yes, so that's our tier list. I'll make sure it's available in the description if you want to make your own or to download ours. And then that brings us to the outro. So please let us know in the comments, what do you thought? What do you think? If you make a tier list, add us on Twitter or something. It'd be cool to see what other people think, or just comment with your thoughts. Don't forget to like the video if you've listened this far. Subscribe on YouTube to get our exports, or follow us on Twitch to get notified when we stream. Next time, we will return in October to kick off our 21st season. We will see
Sweet.
you then.